Okay, good afternoon. How you doing? I'm here today. My name is Matt McGuire, and I've met some of you already. I'm here from Kingsclear Consolidated School, representing them as well as representing Canada and the east coast of Canada. I'm from New Brunswick, and I'm part of a cluster of maritime provinces, and it's my first time here, so I'm having a great time. Thank you for having me. And today's talk is on tearing down the walls of your classroom. And what I mean by that is how we, in the past, have looked at our classroom and the actual teaching that goes on there. We often think about that as just happening within those four walls of our classroom. And what I'm going to talk about today is just the opening up of that idea into a transformation from the four walls of your classroom into no walls of the actual world, a global classroom where students are collaborating with other students from all over the world, but also a sense of community that starts from your school to your local community and expanding to a global community as well. So thanks for joining me. So one of my goals as an educator is having students discover who they are as people, who they are as citizens, and who they are as global citizens further on. And who they are as people is not just about knowing themselves, but knowing themselves and their place in the world. And so in order to do that, students have to understand other cultures. And in my experience, that's been a very rich experience because students start with a lot of misconceptions, and that's okay. Quite often these are from maybe family members, maybe the social media that they've been exposed to. But those misconceptions are important because we also want to tear down those misconceptions. And so students will seek the truth not only through learning themselves, but through learning how to research and learning what exactly is the truth to them. And also, as a teacher, I want them to do this, developing authentic social skills, academic skills, and collaborative community involvement on their part too. I think that's important. So we're going to start with just talking briefly about the curriculum before we talk about tearing down the walls, because where we all come from different places, curriculum can be approached in many ways. And quite often we will take a curriculum document and we will read those outcomes, and then we'll say, okay, how can I teach these outcomes to my students? And that's fair, but I would argue that as an educator, we should know these outcomes, memorize them, and have them in the back of our minds. But to teach from them may not be the best approach for learning. What I think the best approach for learning is to get to know your students first, who they are, what their interests and what their passions are, and allowing them to almost have a say in, well, definitely have a say in what will be learned that year. In terms of content, then it's my job as an educator to bring the curriculum back and make sure that it's surfacing in these ideas and passions that they have as students. So it's almost an inside-out approach from what we may be used to reverting back to the curriculum. So, and that's what I just mentioned. So basically, to twist that around, a few people that I've read about in my studies personally, what does the curriculum aim to do? Or what is even school? What's the purpose of schooling? Well, Aoki would say that it's to prepare students for university. Hayden would say for the job market or the workforce. And if you're familiar with any TED Talks, they've kind of mentioned and pointed out that quite often our education system has been based off of an industrial-based system where we're producing something and churning out a product. And to me, that doesn't seem like enriching authentic learning. which is what their argument would be as well. And Steve Wozniak from Apple would say that we're stuck in this entrenched paradigm that learning happens this way. But I think things are shifting and things are changing. Who creates the curriculum documents? Well, quite often they are people that are removed from the classroom. So it's not current teachers that are necessarily creating these curriculum documents. And there may be a bit of a disconnect there, not to slight those who create them, because they are doing fantastic jobs in many cases. Also, they do select teachers to do that. Quite often, retired teachers or teachers that have moved on from the classroom. And there's the Department of Education, school district office, respectively. And how is it structured? Well, quite often our school systems are structured so there's subjects, and that students learn in subjects. So now we're going to do math. So put away your language arts material. Or now it's time for science. So it seems like there's a disconnect from literacy. And I would argue that cross-curricular subjects should be taught all at one time. So just because it may be an allotment of time needed for math doesn't mean that we can't be doing literacy and science and art and music and phys ed and whatnot all at the same time. And then there are time allotments, right? We have to teach a certain amount of minutes of certain subject per week. It just seems that can be a closed box approach at times. To keep an open mind, I think, if a teaching moment approaches, to not be afraid to seize that teaching moment. And we'll get to that. So inside the curriculum, how can a curriculum be related to my students is how I would argue to approach this. What's the significance? Well, Pernard would say for self in society. And basically that's students need to have an authentic, meaningful connection. They have to be learning in a context that's relevant and meaningful to them. And I think that makes sense. So basically I'm talking about a mandated curriculum, this must be taught, versus an interpreted one where, yes, I am going to make sure that this curriculum is taught, but I'm going to do it in a way that isn't so dictated, in a way that students and passions and interests will be the vessel that they learn from, and so they can make learning their own. And that's the teacher's role. Okay, so I think the learning concoction, again, it's this true connection that we have with our students. And what does that consist of? Well, the first thing, what I like to do on day one with my students is to get to know them. Whether that's a small school, a big school, a small organization, a large organization, or wherever you find yourself. But you have to get to know your students to know what they are passionate and interested in and build those bonds of trust. So one way to start is with interest assessments, to find out what students are interested in and what they're passionate about. So a generic model might be a way to start, a questionnaire that students could fill in or check off. That might be a way to start, like this one you see here. That may be able to, depending on the age level, to prompt them for these things. But another way is to sit down and interview students. For example, finding out their learning styles. Are they a visual learner, kinesthetic learner? What they're interested in. And you'll see, this is an actual graph here that you'll see students, you'll see interested, let's say, out in the outdoors or ancient medieval societies, space, history, and then specific things, swimming, amphibians. Getting to know your students allows you to make these connections as you're teaching. And as well, taking in consideration Gardner's intelligences. Differentiation is when we actually help each learner learn in their own way, when we take into the consideration their learning needs and their learning styles. And that's a given as educators. We need to make sure that every student feels confident to learn and also respected, and that they can trust the people around them, that they can contribute to the learning of the classroom to everyone. Because everyone has something to contribute, but they must feel that way in order to do that. But the number one way I find to connect with your students, to allow real learning to happen, is to build relationships with them. It's that trust. It's that sharing of passions and excitement that allows your classroom walls to come down. And we adapt the curriculum accordingly. So, creativity and identity are some things that may be lost in our classrooms at times or in our learning areas. And I think that that's something that we need to be conscious of, is that we can't just put all of our apples in the one basket of curriculum. That this idea of creativity and identity has to be something that flourishes and has to be something that is a very important part of our classroom and our learning areas. I'm just going to show you a quick video. This is Ken Robinson on TED Talks, just talking about that very thing.
Education, and I think we all do. We have a huge vested interest in it, partly because it's education that's meant to take us into this future that we can't grasp. If you think of it, children starting school this year will be retiring in 2065. Nobody has a clue, despite all the expertise that's been on parade for the past 4 days, what the world will look like in 5 years' time. And yet we're meant to be educating them for it. So the unpredictability, I think, is extraordinary. And the third part of this is that we've all agreed, nonetheless, on the really extraordinary capacities that children have, their capacities for innovation. I mean, Serena last night was a marvel, wasn't she? Just seeing what she could do. And she's exceptional, but I think she's not, so to speak, exceptional in the whole of childhood. What you have there is a person of extraordinary dedication who found a talent. And my contention is all kids have tremendous talents, and we squander them pretty ruthlessly. So I want to talk about education, and I want to talk about creativity. My contention is that creativity now is as important in education as literacy, and we should treat it with the same status. Every country on earth at the moment is reforming public education. There are two...
Okay, so Ken Robinson stating that creativity is just as important as literacy. Is there anyone in the theater today that would agree with that? Creativity just as important as literacy? I think there's a lot to be said about that. It's difficult to compare those two things, but nonetheless, I think that without creativity, we're not going to be getting the results from literacy or science or math or all the core subject areas and those around them. Without that creativity, we can't expect for students to learn in these meaningful, authentic ways. Students aren't robots. Students are human beings. When I'm teaching writing, for example, a lot of young students, I'm an elementary school teacher, a lot of young students will complain that they're out of ideas for writing. They don't know what to write about. But really, it's just that they haven't looked at it that way. We need to unearth those small seed ideas from their daily life and to let them know that those are great writing opportunities. Those are great sharing opportunities. How to actually communicate those orally or on paper or on a laptop or whatever the medium might be, that's what our jobs are. So to actually take that, for example, how do students, or anyone for that matter, hook a reader into a story that they've created? And one tool that I would use is to create book trailers. And what book trailers are is students can relate to movie trailers. A lot of students watch movies, and they realize that when they're watching a movie trailer on television or wherever, that they're excited to watch that movie. They don't know what happens in the movie. They don't know the ending of the movie. But they've been teased enough and given a few details, and then that hook. So they want to go to the theater and see that movie. That's the same thing that I try to get students to do, is to not tell that full story right away, is to lead up to it and using the imagery and the adjectives and whatnot, those skills of writing. And so they actually make book trailers, which are essentially movie trailers, but about their writing. And then they cut off the ending of their trailer with a hook. If you want to find out what happens next, read my book. And that's one way that I found is very effective. And we can watch one of those book trailers as well. Okay, so starting to talk about tearing down the walls of your classroom. So I think we need to start talking about community, because community starts from one person and builds exponentially to a global community. And to have that sense of community is very important. So let's start with school, the school community. One thing that we use in our school is, this is a great book by Tom Rath and Mary Reckmeimer, that filling buckets is a great way for students to develop a very positive and safe community. Filling buckets is anyone familiar with that? Great. It's when you deposit something in someone else's bucket, and that could be emotional or physical. Basically, it's when you are encouraging or building someone else up. That's called putting something in their bucket. It makes them feel good and makes everyone feel good. And that's one approach to a positive community. Another that thing that's been taken on by a lot of schools is the 7 Habits of Happy Kids too. These are just examples. They're not staples. They're choice. But they're a good way to start from day one in building that positive community. So the students are the center of learning. And if the students aren't the center of learning, then who is? Because we definitely don't know everything, but if we know the curriculum and we're the one teaching it, if the students aren't at the center of this, then who's really learning, right? The students have to be the ones that feel like this is happening. So an example of this is an extracurricular activity would be to have students have the ability and the empowerment to lead a club at their school. For students to show up at noon hour, and they would have lesson plans to learn every day for their phys ed club. So that you can imagine the range of clubs that would be offered at a school in a given week, let alone a given year. At the end of these clubs, students have built bonds of relationships and trust, but they've also been empowered. They feel like they're actually teaching now. And we know that when you teach something, that's the best way to learn it as well. And obviously, teachers are students too. We must constantly be learning just as much as students. Okay, so we move from school to a local community, and that could be just in your surrounding area, whether that's a village, a town, a city, or a metropolitan. Getting into the local, so that involves hosting special events in your area. So again, beyond the walls of just your classroom. So this is just an example of a few things. This is at our school, this is a Halloween event that's open to the public and the surrounding community, not just for school members themselves. So the community feels like they are part of your learning organization. Hosting movie nights is just another idea. Kids from the community, not just the school, can come, supervise, have some popcorn and juice and watch a movie. And then hosting things like Family Literacy Day, taking learning beyond the classroom and exposing adults and children alike to be involved in this. Inviting special guests to come in. Leaders in your community can do that. Established authors is another nice way to do that, to have that connection between real authors and kids. One of the projects that I'm doing at our school this is my 3rd year, KCS is my school name, but Kids in the Community. And that started up from the ground up. What began as an interest in composting, bringing someone in and teaching us what composting is and how it works, again, that snowballed into a larger community project because the kids were interested in it. They wanted to take it to the next level. So what happened was we brought in volunteers to come in and dig a garden plot, a 20 by 20 garden plot that would eventually turn into something huge, bringing in farmers to show us how to plant potatoes, how to plant crops in our garden, and then locals who are experienced in the field as well to help us to actually start and plant the garden. This garden has now been in 3 years running, And we have fed the community kitchen in our surrounding area for 2 years of those 3. And not to mention winning awards, but it's just the satisfaction of kids reaching out and being active in their community, helping others, but also learning where and how things work. Because in my classroom, this all began when I asked an open-ended question to the students: where do carrots come from? Where does celery come from? And the first answer that I got when the first hand said, the grocery store. And yet that's where those vegetables end up. It's not where they begin. So there was a disconnect there, and seeing that opportunity turned into a full-blown project. So what we did was we took and we harvested, these things just connected to our curriculum seamlessly. We took that and we connected it to our science and to our math outcomes, but then we had students actually doing work, peeling potatoes, and in the kitchen working and making dishes, not only feeding the school, but feeding the community itself as well. And that felt good. It's opening up your school, tearing down the walls is about bringing people in, because as educators, we aren't experts in everything, but there are experts out there who would be more than willing and would love to come in and share these things with kids. This gentleman here is a math professor at the university in our city, coming in and having special math days and playing math games. And having that person come in and it's not just you all the time makes a big difference. Kids feel like they're actually having someone special come in to learn from. Having cultural days where this is another lady, a good friend of mine and friend of my aunt who worked in a very northern spot in Canada, in Tuktoyaktuk, and bringing in some of the materials and tools and clothing that this community uses and having the kids put their hands on it instead of just reading it in a book is really important. That's a connection to a community far from our own. And this gentleman here is a natural resources officer bringing in materials for kids to again put hands on and see. These are our planispheres, learning about outer space. And this gentleman was from a First Nations community. Here's our election day, where students are practicing the voting. Again, starting this at an early age is great exposure. Lots of visitors to our classroom, music and drumming. So opening up the walls basically means opening up your classroom for others to come in. And on the reverse side of things, allowing kids to go elsewhere too. This is a friend of mine who allowed a couple kids who had real vested interest in woodworking, and we didn't really have the tools and the resources to do that at our school. So on a Wednesday afternoon, we have half days on Wednesdays in our district, but actually having kids go on a little field trip with me, take them to a woodworking shop. These kids are very, very interested in this, and this is what they have a vested interest in, so why not allow them to explore that? And here's what they were beginning to work on back at the school. It was one of those marble traps where it comes down a huge kind of set of ramps and whatnot and ends up in a bucket or something in a bell dinghy. This is our legislative assembly, going and learning how our government works, and meeting our premier himself was a great experience for kids. So again, getting outside of that classroom, and this is Ducks Unlimited, having kids get out in the swamps and having that tangible learning that happens. This is one of our science outcomes. And this gentleman is here getting his hands dirty and his boots wet. And this is a program, Learning Buddies, where younger students get together with older students and work together. And that's a 21st century skill, is that working together, that collaborative process. That's something that we know is going to be around. Ken Robinson was saying it's uncertain what's going to happen in our future, but collaboration is one that we're certain is going to exist. And then we move out to a global stage. I'm going to show you some examples of some of these things in just a minute, just kind of running and leading up to it. So the many benefits of media in the classroom And sometimes we're scared of media because we can't control it. So what we need to do is find out what are some of those tools and what are some of those processes that we can control as educators and that we can allow students to become immersed into. So media is a great way to engage children, but there has to be a balance, I think, in a lot of our traditional forms and our modern forms too. So this is just an example of a project that we did with Dubai. And using a ton of the tech tools that we've been using, we felt it important that we still have that handwritten connection from someone else across the other side of the world. So this is the reaction when my students received letters from Dubai, that their first letters that they'd been waiting for. Guys and girls, we got a package in the mail.
Mathew McGuire.
This was an international school.
My Chinese money. Our best friends. And then her said my name. Oh yeah. Does anybody have Chris for a buddy?
So this excitement in the classroom is contagious, and it's awesome. It's great to have these kids that's excited. Do you know what the first thing they asked to do? They asked to write back. That was the first thing that they wanted to do. They wanted to write back immediately. So it was at the end of our literacy period. So am I to say, well, that's great, we are going to write back, but it's time for math? Or am I going to say, no, this is the time when the creative juices are flowing, when these kids are passionate and excited about writing. It's a time to actually take hold of that and to allow kids to go beyond that and to get passionate, to respond. And this is our letters when the kids in Dubai received them in this international school. This is a Skype we had with a lady teacher from Mozambique. We had a lot of questions about Mozambique, and one of the only ways that we could find these out was to talk to her firsthand, and she shared a lot of her teaching experiences with us as well. And that was a phenomenal experience. Now, when Yoko was up here talking yesterday, I was really moved because she was talking about Japan's tsunami. And I had a personal experience with that in Canada. We were working with two schools, one from Prague and one from Japan, 2 years ago. And we were doing collaborative projects with them. But when the tsunami hit, we lost contact with our friends in Japan. And we were scared, and we were very concerned. And my students asked me, how can we help? We don't have oodles of money. I'm sure we could raise it, but how can we help right now? And so again, knowing my curriculum, it was an opportunity to seize poetry. Instead of just starting a unit on poetry, this was the time that I could introduce haikus. It was appropriate, it was contextual. And so we did start haiku poems, and I said, we can help our friends in Japan. We're going to write them haiku poetry and let them know how we're feeling about them. And at the same time, we're checking off that curriculum outcome. So here's a couple examples of what my students created for our friends in Japan. Winter is going, we are thinking of you all, Japan is healing. And then I had them not only share a best wish or a thinking of you haiku, but also the traditional nature-based haiku. Winter is not here. All boys and girls are smiling and playing in mud. We give you the best. We are thinking about you. We feel so sorry. We are here for you, hoping you are okay. Safe and sound, we're hoping you're okay. Can we do anything? They also chose pictures that they felt might be encouraging as well. This one is great. Hoping you're all right, giving all my love to you. Good luck's on your way. Strong as a mountain, tall as a cherry blossom, brave like a panda. So this little girl went to the extent of researching some authentic things that are only appropriate to Japan and including those in here. That's research, that's authentic research. She's learning at the same time facts about Japan that are very relevant. So I'm just going to start sharing a little more informal things with you now. So this is a project called Reading Across the Globe, and it's ongoing now. It's been a couple years since I've been doing this and sharing this project with some other fellow superpower educators, friends of mine, and they're fantastic. They've really helped me out a lot, and as teachers, we're learning together, and as students, they're learning with other students as well. It's quite the collaborative process. So I'm going to show you what's called a voice thread. This is a way that students can take some of this learning and put it together into a final product that we can both share together. So this is our wiki. It's Reading Across the Globe. And basically the goal of it is to represent a global approach to collaborative inference. So students and teachers from around the world are using the same text, and the text was called My Family by Sheila Kincaid. It's the same text, and it's about how different cultures around the world do different things, how they celebrate traditions. You'll see their celebrations on the sidebar: clothing, family and childcare, food, homes and buildings, jobs, play and recreation, religion, and transportation. Some of these things that make us unique, but the more educated we are, the more understanding we are and compassionate towards each other. So what happened was this book here by Sheila Kincaid, as I mentioned, is called My Family. And so we read this book as a class, and each classroom did this. And inside are these major categories. So students worked online with each other, not with students in their own classroom, but with students from these other countries. So what they did was they worked together, and they were put in a group. So, okay, you're in celebrations group, and they get to choose their groups. You're in the clothing group, and you're going to work with these people online, and you're going to actually find out a lot about different cultures in clothing. And yes, these students had many misconceptions, but they were solving them and resolving them themselves by doing this research and by communicating with these actual other kids from these places too. So here's an example of the voice thread, one of the things that was connected in the end here with these kids. I'm just going to show you. So this is a family section here. I'm just going to play. So what they did was they chose one fact that they learned, and then they shared it. They recorded their voice and uploaded their picture. No names or anything, and they shared based off of the pictures they were looking at. They shared what they learned and created this multimedia.
Care a lot about their children in the United States. 1/4 of all the children are at home before beginning elementary school. The other quarters of the family are in daycare. In Philippines, a kid looks happy taking a bath with a bucket. Good water for bathing and cooking is not available for all people of the world. We should all try to help people without good water.
So he's looking at that picture, and he's realizing that the water from his tap, this little guy was from the United States, the water from his tap that he drinks of so freely every day is not an available resource everywhere in the world. I think that's a strong connection to becoming a global citizen, to have that realization. I think that's very powerful. And this goes on. If you watch this is just the family section. It goes into homes, and as you can see, I mean, in this picture here, there's Brazil, United States, and Bangladesh, and again the Philippines and Italy. It goes on. So the globe is quite well represented. Recreation, the games that we play. The nice thing about this is that, as I mentioned at the beginning, our differences make us stronger, our uniquenesses. These kids, they realize that we all have celebrations that may vary, that are different. But the number one thing that they realized in the end is that these kids were kids, and that they all enjoyed the same things. The families, there was one strong connection, and that was love. And those kids were able to get an intrinsic understanding of that too. They also used Edmodo, this program here. It's kind of like Facebook, but it's very well regulated and safe, and only those who are part of it can participate. But again, this is a way for them to communicate in the group, so this is how they learn together. Here's Ryan, and what we do is we allow them to use their first name and the initials of their school. that's just a safety internet precaution. This is, hello, I'm in the jobs group. I live in New York. We're very lucky that we're able to go to stores and buy food and that we don't have to do it naturally. So there's that disconnect becoming connected. And then another student in Slovakia, they pray on their knees. And this girl down here says, we do that in Fredericton at a church. Now, there's learning opportunities in these. You can't expect kids to be perfect. There's learning opportunities that are going to happen here. Because if you keep looking down, it says, in Thailand, they hold 3 sticks with a ball and pray on it and pray. And this one student says, that's weird and cool at the same time, but why do they use sticks instead of crosses and a Bible and read it? So that's the learning opportunity. I mean, first of all, it's not weird. But for her this is a teachable moment. This is a time for us to learn about uniqueness and about everyone's culture and religion. So it's a chance for others to respond, and it's a chance for teachers and other children to take advantage of that teachable moment. One thing we did with our groups, we had 7 countries working together, and we did several projects through the year, but we wanted to have kind of a grand finale of a way that we could celebrate each other's cultures. And we thought, well, what's a universal thing that we share? Well, one is the love for food. So what we did was as educators, we asked students to go home and discuss with their families, what's a family recipe that's important to our family? Why is it important? And then to take that further, what is the recipe? Why is it important? But then to actually make it and to document themselves making it and to bring it in to their classmates to eat. But not only that, but in the end was a collaborative project. We made the complete international cookbook, and we had it published and then used it as a fundraiser. And so all these countries around the world, you'll see here, 2 from Canada. We had the French and English both represented, and then 1 from Australia, and Peru, Czech Republic, and the UAE. We had those represented, and basically the recipes included in that were sent out. And so it was great because kids were learning about these recipes and why they were important to people, what connections they had, what materials and ingredients they used in them. And it was opening up their minds, too, at the same time. So here's a quote by Aoki. It says, multicultural education tells us that schools should strive to contribute to the cultural enrichment of students by delivering programs geared towards preserving and extending cultural diversity. And they see that as a valuable resource. I'm going to move on quickly. Basically, what I'd like to do here is I'm just going to show you a couple more examples things that we're doing. We did a bald eagle project this year where we had a live webcam on an eagle's nest, and it was fascinating. We started watching in February a male and female bald eagle couple who were preparing to raise young. They hadn't been born yet, but they were preparing the nest. So we split kids into groups. And again, they're not working with kids in their own class. They're working with kids around the world. So we had birds of prey and habitat and symbolism and cultural influence, protection laws, lifespan, and anatomy. These were the groups that all these kids, and you can see the different color-coordinated kids' names. These are the different groups from different schools. So they're all working with these kids now. And that's a 21st century skill again. So what happened was we had our live wiki site, and this is a live webcam you're looking at right here. Funny story is this camera right here was our original camera. It took a picture of this bald eagle here. It was very, very close to the nest. And we got to watch build their nest, and then the anticipation of the eaglets coming, a rabbit, a fish, a bird, other things the eagles would bring, snatch, and hunt into the nest. And then those eggs were laid, and after a certain amount of time, we were learning all the math that we could, anticipating and estimating when they were going to be born. The eggs hatched, and the eaglets were fed. It was amazing. It was so cool. Then that camera in the corner got struck by lightning. And since the protection laws say you can't go up anywhere near the nest, we had to set up a different camera. So if I actually click on this play button, you'll actually see what we're looking at the end. Now, this is a live webcam. Unfortunately, there's no eagles there right now. They do come back to the nest, but every morning we'd turn this on and we'd keep it there, and we were learning new things every day. Just to show you a couple of pictures of what we did see is right here. This is fantastic. I'm just going to go to my file here. Here's our bald eagle project. We had kids writing poetry, kids creating artwork, and these were all an accumulation of this one project that lasted from February until May. Not all the time, but when it was appropriate. So here's the poems, some mosaics they made. Students researched, and I'll just show you a few of these snapshots from our webcam. So here's a look at some of our eaglet shots. These are actual shots. This was in Iowa in the United States. So there's the firstborn eaglet and the egg of the next one that was hatched the next day. This is an actual shot. Very cute. There's some fish in the back. This was before they were born. There's the shot of the eggs. This is the male and female. There's the eggs, and they would alternate duties of incubation. One would go and hunt while the other one would incubate. And this was the switching of the guard there. There's the hole in the next egg coming. Some feeding. And here's the two eaglets. And you'll see the rabbit in the left corner. There's a fish beside that, a fish on the right, and there's actually another bird up there as well. And both eaglets anticipating being fed there. So we were watching this live on a webcam, which is incredible. And there's a shot of our webcam. And there's a couple good shots of the male and female eagles. That's what the eaglets ended up looking like after 2 months. And that was a great way to close our project. We had a final celebration at the school, and it was fantastic. We actually created a song out of this as our way of closing off our project. But just so you know, the research that kids did was captured on another voice thread. This is what a voice thread looks like when you're all working on it. And students upload their information on there again, just like before.
Hi, my name's Allie. A bald eagle's wingspan is over 7 feet long, and they have 7,000 feathers. And on their back feathers, they have oil leaky stuff to get themselves clean. Bald eagles clean themselves because they need smooth feathers to fly.
So she's matching the picture to the text that she has as well. And it goes...
Beak is like a tip for terry, where they feed their chicks and...
So I'll just flip through and they'll show you all the kids that contributed to this, showing what they've learned. And I do have lots more to talk about, but I understand we have some time constraints. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you the power of this and how these projects can come together and have a whole lot of different things coming in them. This is actually a video that my class made as our final project celebration. And students wrote this song based off of what they learned all through this process. And then we recorded the video, and as you can see, we have 1,105 views on YouTube, which they were pretty excited about. some of their poetry showcased here. This is grade 2. Just going to stop it there, but so that was Through the Eyes of an Eagle. That was a great way for them to finalize. So the other things that you can do, I mean, there's blogging that you can do with your kids. It's a great way to share communication. This is a program called Storybird, where kids look at artwork and they develop stories based on the art. We took it as a collaborative opportunity with Australia because of the time difference. We couldn't usually work with them online. So what would happen is, in this case, this is what Halloween looks like in New Brunswick. This is what a girl named Matea was doing with a girl named Vesna from Australia. She would go on and she would write the first page of the story. When it comes to Halloween in New Brunswick, people dress up in costumes, some spooky plain. Then we go to different houses and say trick or treat. Then they give us candy. Matea writes that. She goes home and goes to bed. Her partner from Australia gets up and chooses the artwork that's themed for the next page and writes it while Matea is sleeping. But there was a scientist who hated Halloween so much, and one Halloween he came up with an amazing stink bomb that would kill Halloween forever. And when she would read that the next morning, she would have to anticipate that and move on from that and write the next page again. He took a remote and he pressed the button and the stink bomb exploded. She's just looking at this and using that as a creative way to write this story. So they had fun with that, but sadly invention didn't work, and instead it turned him into a baby. They're just using these pictures, so Storybird is a great program for that as well. And the last thing I want to show you is, to close with you today, is tearing down the walls of your classroom, working with other kids around the world. You can see on the left side of the screen here, these are some countries that we worked with. There's the United States. We worked with Alaska and Illinois. As well, we worked with Taiwan, we worked with Australia and Costa Rica and Ireland. We worked with these, and how we did this was we wanted kids to use data to make sense of their world, to understand other places, to make connections with them, to develop an understanding and compassion. So the first thing we asked them these questions: what contributes to differences around the world, and how? How does our judgment of differences contribute to our misunderstanding? How can knowing the context of cultural difference help us understand each other? And how does collecting and analyzing data help us understand this? So what we did was we had kids monitor temperatures every month and every day, actually, monitor temperatures, rainfall amounts, and those types of things, so they could kind of get a handle on how countries differed that way. But then we had them upload pictures of animals, landforms, and plants from their region of the world and share those, and have other countries and other schools ask questions about them. So, for example, here's animals from Alaska. So this school would upload 5 animals from Alaska or more, and then all the other schools would go look at them and submit questions. And those kids, again, would have to research that and find that. So here's what Alaska submitted for animals. A picture of a marmot, porcupine, bald eagle, polar bear, moose, bear, whale. And so here's the questions that the students were asking underneath. Why is the porcupine hanging out near the glacier? Why do bald eagles stay near Juneau? So these are questions. What's the bald eagle's wingspan, and why do you think it's called a bald eagle when it seems to have lots of feathers on its head? I mean, that's a legit question. If you go and compare Alaska to, let's say, Costa Rican animals, you'll see quite the difference, and the kids see these differences and want to know. So, monkeys and sloths. And again, the questions. So, a really rich experience for these kids. So I just encourage you, I thank you for coming today to tear down the walls of your classroom, not only just on a global level, but on a community level, in your school, your local community, and in your global community. Because developing global citizenship and what it means to work together with everyone around our world, I think is the next step in our education. And I think it's in the next step in the positives of education and learning and moving forward. So thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you, Matthew, for an excellent presentation.